The wind carried dust across the empty road, whispering through broken fences and creaking wooden signs that hadn't been painted in years. Evening settled slowly over the town, the sun dipping low behind the hills and stretching long shadows across the dirt street. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other's business, where silence meant judgment, and kindness was rare. Elias Turner stood at the edge of his ranch, hands resting on the rough wooden gate as he looked toward the town below. He had always kept to himself. The cattle, the land, and the sky were enough for him. People, on the other hand, were complicated. Cruel, sometimes. He hadn't planned to go into town that evening. But supplies were low, and the long winter ahead meant he couldn't wait. As he guided his horse down the dusty path, he felt that same old tension settle in his chest. The town hadn't changed. It never did. The same crooked saloon doors, the same group of men gathered outside the general store, the same low murmurs that stopped whenever someone unfamiliar walked by. Elias tied his horse near the post and stepped into the fading light of the street. He moved quickly, keeping his eyes down, hoping to get what he needed and leave. But then he heard it. A voice, soft, shaking. "Please, just let me go." Elias turned before he could stop himself. Near the alley beside the saloon, a small crowd had gathered. Laughter broke through the evening air, rough and sharp. Someone muttered something cruel, and another voice answered with a mocking tone. He didn't want to get involved. He never did. But then he saw her. She stood against the wall, her hands trembling, her eyes wide with fear. Her dress was worn thin, her hair tangled from the wind. Dirt streaked her face, but it couldn't hide how young she looked. Not a child, but not much older than one. A man stood too close to her, blocking her path. The others watched like it was entertainment. "Hold me, use me, just get me out of here," she whispered, her voice breaking. The words hit Elias like a punch to the chest. Not because of what she said, but because of the desperation behind them. She wasn't offering, she was begging to escape. For a moment, no one moved. The men around her smirked, exchanging glances like they'd just been handed permission to humiliate her further. Elias felt something twist deep inside him. Anger, not loud, not wild, just steady and cold. He stepped forward. "That's enough," he said. His voice wasn't raised. It didn't need to be. The men turned, surprised. One of them laughed. "Well, look who decided to join us." The quiet rancher. Elias didn't answer. His eyes stayed on the girl. She looked at him like she wasn't sure if he was real. "Come on," the man near her said, his tone mocking. "She asked for help. Maybe she wants yours." A few of them chuckled. Elias took another step forward, his boots heavy against the dirt. "She's leaving," he said. The man's smile faded. "And who's gonna make her?" Elias didn't respond. He simply stood there, tall and still, his presence calm but unshakable. Silence stretched between them. It wasn't fear that made the men step back. It was certainty. They knew the kind of man Elias was. The kind who didn't talk much. The kind who didn't bluff. The one closest to the girl scoffed and raised his hands. "Fine, take her. Not like she's worth the trouble." They stepped aside, their laughter fading as they walked away. The girl didn't move. Elias approached slowly, careful not to startle her. Up close, he could see the tears in her eyes, the way her hands shook like she was freezing even in the warm air. "It's all right," he said quietly. "You're safe now." Her lip trembled. "I didn't mean it." "What?" I said. "I didn't mean it." "I know." Her shoulders dropped slightly, like the weight of the world had shifted, even if just a little. "Can you walk?" he asked. She nodded. He didn't touch her, just turned and began walking toward his horse, giving her the space to follow if she wanted. For a moment, he wasn't sure she would. Then he heard her footsteps behind him. He helped her up onto the horse, making sure she was steady before climbing up behind her. She was so light it felt like she might disappear in the wind. They rode in silence. The town faded behind them, the noise replaced by the steady rhythm of hooves and the quiet hum of crickets. After a while, she spoke. "Why did you help me?" Elias thought about it. "Because someone should have." She was quiet again. "I didn't have anywhere else to go," she said softly. "I came here looking for work. But they laughed." Her voice cracked, and she stopped talking. Elias felt his jaw tighten. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lena. I'm Elias." She nodded, even though he couldn't see her face. They reached the ranch just as the last light disappeared. The house stood alone under the wide sky, lanterns glowing faintly through the windows. Elias helped her down gently. Inside, the warmth wrapped around them. He handed her a blanket and set water on the table. "You can stay here tonight," he said. "There's food in the kitchen. And a bed in the spare room." She stared at him, confused. "That's it?" she asked. He frowned slightly. "What do you mean? You're not going to ask for anything?" The question hung in the air. Elias shook his head slowly. "No." Her eyes filled with tears again, but this time they didn't fall. She sat down, clutching the blanket tightly around her shoulders like it was the first real comfort she'd felt in a long time. "Thank you," she whispered. Over the next few days, Lena stayed quiet. She helped where she could, sweeping the porch, feeding the chickens, washing dishes. She spoke little, but her hands worked hard. Elias didn't ask questions she wasn't ready to answer. He noticed the way she flinched at loud noises. The way she looked over her shoulder whenever someone passed on the road. The way she avoided mirrors. But slowly, something began to change. One morning, he found her standing outside, watching the sunrise. "It's beautiful," she said. He nodded. "It is." She smiled, just a little. Weeks passed. The town talked, of course. They always did. But Elias didn't care, and neither did she. One evening, as they sat on the porch, Lena turned to him. "That night," she said quietly, "I thought my life was over." Elias didn't say anything. "I was so scared. I said things I didn't mean. I just wanted to get away. I thought no one would help me unless I gave them something in return." Her voice trembled. "But you didn't take anything," she continued. "You just helped me." Elias looked out at the land stretching wide and endless in front of them. "You don't owe anyone your dignity," he said. "Not for safety. Not for kindness. Not for anything." Lena swallowed hard. "I didn't know that before," she admitted. Silence settled between them, but it was a peaceful kind. The kind that felt like healing. For the first time in a long while, Lena felt safe. And for the first time in years, Elias didn't feel quite so alone. The town might have seen shame that night. But Elias had seen something else. A person who needed saving. And a reason to open his door again. The first snow of the season came quietly. Elias noticed it before sunrise, when the world still felt half asleep and the sky was a pale shade of gray. He opened the door to the cold morning air and saw the thin white layer covering the ground. Soft and untouched, the ranch looked different under snow. Cleaner, calmer. For a moment, he stood there, breathing in the cold, watching his breath rise into the still air. Behind him, he heard slow footsteps. Lena stepped into the doorway, wrapping the thick wool blanket tighter around her shoulders. Her hair was still messy from sleep, her eyes heavy, but when she saw the snow, something bright flickered across her face. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Elias nodded. First of the year, she stepped out onto the porch, careful and slow, like she wasn't used to trusting the ground beneath her feet. Her bare toes touched the edge of the cold wood, and she laughed softly when the chill reached her skin. He hadn't heard her laugh much. It surprised him. She looked out across the open land, the cattle moving slowly in the distance, the sky stretching endlessly above them. "I forgot what quiet felt like," she said. Elias leaned against the post beside her. "The quiet used to bother me." She glanced at him. "Used to. Not anymore." They stood there for a while, not saying much. The wind moved gently through the trees, carrying the smell of frost and earth. Somewhere in the distance, a bird called out. For the first time since she arrived, Lena looked like she belonged somewhere. But the peace didn't last. Later that morning, Elias rode into town for supplies. He didn't want to, but the ranch needed things he couldn't grow or fix himself. Lena had offered to come, but he told her to stay. "It's better if you don't go," he said gently. She didn't ask why. The town was colder than the ranch, not because of the weather, but because of the people. Elias could feel the stares as soon as he arrived. They weren't subtle. Men paused mid-conversation. Women leaned toward each other and whispered. Word had spread. It always did. He tied his horse outside the general store and walked in. The shopkeeper, Mr. Collins, was a heavy man with tired eyes and a permanent frown. "You're taking in strays now," Collins said without looking up. Elias ignored him and grabbed a sack of flour from the shelf. "I heard she was one of those girls," Collins continued. "Came from nowhere. No family. No name worth mentioning." Elias set the sack on the counter, his jaw tight. "She has a name," he said quietly. Collins finally looked up. "Does she?" Elias met his eyes. "Lena." The shopkeeper shrugged. "Well, Lena's going to bring trouble. Mark my words." Elias paid and left without another word. Outside, the men near the saloon were already watching him. One of them, the same man who had cornered Lena weeks ago, smirked as Elias passed. "Still playing hero," the man called out. Elias didn't stop. "Careful," the man added. "Girls like that don't stay grateful forever." Elias kept walking, but the words stayed with him. The ride back felt longer than usual. The sky was growing darker, clouds thickening overhead. By the time he reached the ranch, snow had started falling again. Lena was in the yard, feeding the chickens. She looked up when she heard the horse, her face lighting up in a way that caught him off guard. "You're back," she said, hurrying over. He nodded and handed her the small sack of sugar he'd bought just for her. He remembered her mentioning once how much she missed sweet tea. Her eyes widened. "You didn't have to." "I know." She held it carefully, like it was something fragile. Inside, she brewed tea while he stacked the supplies. The warmth of the house wrapped around them again, but Elias couldn't shake the heaviness in his chest. Lena noticed. "What happened?" she asked softly. He hesitated. "Nothing." She studied him for a moment, then looked down at her cup. "They talked about me, didn't they?" Elias didn't answer. Her fingers tightened around the mug. "They always do. They don't know you," he said. "They don't want to." The room fell quiet. "I used to think if I worked hard enough, if I stayed quiet, people would accept me," she continued. "But it didn't matter. Wherever I went, I was still the girl with nothing. The girl no one claimed." Elias sat across from her, his hands resting on the table. "You're not nothing," he said. She looked at him, her eyes searching his face like she was trying to see if he really believed that. "Then what am I?" she asked. The question caught him off guard. He thought for a moment. "You're someone who kept going," he said, "even when it would have been easier to stop." Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. That night, the storm hit. The wind howled against the walls, rattling the windows. Snow piled high outside, covering the paths and fences. The power flickered, leaving the house lit only by lanterns. Lena sat by the fire, her knees pulled close to her chest. Elias could tell she was scared. "You've been through storms before?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "Just not like this." The wind slammed against the door, making her flinch. He added more wood to the fire. "It'll pass," he said. She watched the flames dance for a moment. "Can I ask you something?" she said quietly. "Sure. Why do you live out here alone?" Elias leaned back in his chair. "I used to have a family," he said. "A long time ago." She stayed quiet, waiting. "They died in a winter storm," he continued. "The house caught fire. I wasn't there." The words felt heavy as they left his mouth. He didn't talk about it often. Almost never. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He nodded once. After that, the quiet felt safer than people. Lena looked at the fire again. "I think I understand that," she said. The storm raged on through the night. At some point, the wind grew so strong it pushed open one of the back shutters with a loud crack. Lena jumped to her feet. Elias grabbed his coat and stepped outside into the freezing dark. The snow stung his face as he secured the shutter, his hands numb from the cold. When he came back inside, Lena was waiting by the door, worry written across her face. "You could have been hurt," she said. "I've handled worse." She hesitated, then stepped forward and wrapped the blanket around his shoulders. The gesture was small, but it stopped him in his tracks. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For not treating me like I'm broken." He looked at her. "You're not broken," he said. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. That night, the storm slowly faded. Morning came soft and quiet again. Snow covered everything. The world looked new. Lena stepped outside first, her boots crunching into the thick white layer. She turned in a slow circle, taking it all in. Elias watched from the doorway. For the first time since she arrived, she looked strong. Not just safe. Strong. She turned back to him, her cheeks red from the cold, her breath rising into the morning air. "I want to stay," she said. He frowned slightly. "You already are." "No," she said, shaking her head. "I mean, I want to belong here. I want to work, really work, not just help." Elias studied her for a long moment. "Are you sure?" he asked. She nodded. "I don't want to run anymore." He stepped off the porch and walked toward the barn. "Then come on," he said. "We've got fences to fix." Her smile was small, but real. And as she followed him through the snow, something in the air shifted. For the first time, it didn't feel like she was hiding at the ranch. It felt like she was building a life there.